I was just weeks away from marrying the love of my life when everything shattered. My fiancé looked at me with disgust, holding his phone and whispering, "How could you?" I had no idea what he was talking about until I learned my sister had told him I was cheating. My own sister, the one I trusted more than anyone. My wedding was canceled. My name was dragged through the mud, but I stayed silent. Because the truth was louder than any lie she could ever tell. My name is Sarah Miller. I've lived in the quiet suburbs of San Diego my whole life. I teach second grade at a local elementary school where I've worked for the past 7 years. I've always loved the simplicity of children's honesty, the way they tell you what they feel without playing games. Maybe that's why I never expected the people closest to me, adults' family, to betray me so deeply. I come from what outsiders would call a nice family. My parents are retired, still living in the house I grew up in. I'm the youngest of two daughters. My sister Laura is 5 years older than me. She's the type of person who walks into a room and everyone notices her tall, confident, always dressed like she stepped out of a fashion magazine. People gravitate toward her. I used to be one of them. Growing up, I looked up to Laura. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, adventurous, magnetic. I was the quiet one, the bookworm. While Laura partied her way through college, I stayed home and studied. While she traveled the world and dated wildly, I stayed in California and built a life of consistency. I used to think that made me boring. Now, I know it made me stable. I met Michael during my final year of college. He was kind, soft-spoken, and genuinely interested in the little things, like how I organized my classroom library by genre, or how I could never start my day without peppermint tea. We started dating and fell into a rhythm that felt like home. After 4 years together, he proposed during a weekend trip to Big Sur. It was simple and sweet, just like us. I cried when he pulled out the ring, not because I was surprised, but because everything finally felt right. Michael met my family shortly after we got engaged. My parents loved him, but Laura was different. She smiled, hugged him, acted thrilled for us, but something in her eyes felt off. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. She complimented him a little too much. She lingered in conversations a little too long. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was just being insecure. Michael, of course, didn't notice. He was kind to Laura like he was with everyone. He thought she was funny and so stylish. And I couldn't blame him, she was. But as our wedding plans progressed, Laura inserted herself more and more into the process. She offered to help pick my dress plan, the bachelorette party, even coordinate the music playlist. At first, I was grateful, but then things started to feel off. She'd make little comments like, "Are you sure Michael's the one? I mean, you've never dated anyone else seriously." Or she'd say things like, "I saw him chatting with a girl at the gym once, nothing bad, but still. You should keep an eye out." I brushed them off as sisterly concern, but a part of me started to feel uneasy. Still, I moved forward. I chose a beautiful outdoor venue near a vineyard. I picked out a lace gown I adored. Michael and I started premarital counseling, not because we were struggling, but because we believed in building a strong foundation. Life felt full and secure. Then came the cracks. It started subtly. Michael would come home quieter than usual. He'd ask strange questions like, "You've never lied to me about anything, right?" Or, "If someone told me something about you, would you want me to tell you or protect your feelings?" thought he was just stressed about the wedding, but I could feel the distance growing. The warmth in his eyes dimmed a little more each day. One evening, just 6 weeks before our wedding, everything came crashing down. Michael sat me down in our living room and held out his phone. His hands were trembling. On the screen was a long message, screenshots of supposed texts between me and another man, talking about how I regretted getting engaged, how I was still seeing someone on the side. My name was on it, but the words, they weren't mine. The whole thing was fake. My heart dropped. I didn't write these. I whispered, my voice hollow. Michael looked at me like I was a stranger. Sarah, they came from your number. I tried to explain. I begged him to believe me. I offered to show my phone to prove it wasn't true. But he was already slipping away. I need time, he said. I don't know what's real anymore. He left that night. Packed a bag. Said he was going to stay at his brother's for a while. Our wedding was postponed, then canceled. And my world, the life I had built so carefully, shattered into silence. The worst part, Laura's silence. Not once did she call. Not once did she check in. When I finally did see her at our parents' house 2 weeks later, she acted like nothing had happened. But she wore a smug little smile I couldn't unsee. That's when I knew. I didn't have proof yet. But deep in my gut, I knew the person who destroyed my engagement was the one who shared my blood. In the weeks following the canceled wedding, I lived in a haze. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to face my students or my colleagues. My house, once filled with color and laughter, felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. The guest list, the floral arrangements, the dress I hadn't returned yet, all of it sat there like ghosts mocking me. What hurt more than losing Michael was the way it happened. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone I once called my best friend, my sister. I knew it in my bones, but I had no hard evidence. Still, I started paying attention. I began piecing things together. The fake screenshots that Michael showed me, they included information only someone close to me would know. Specific places, private conversations, tiny details I'd never shared with anyone except family. Things I may have said in passing around Laura. And suddenly, all those concerned comments she had made in the months leading up to the wedding took on a different tone. They weren't warnings. They were seeds. Seeds of doubt sown carefully one by one. Then came the final straw. One evening, I went to my parents' house for dinner. I hadn't seen Laura since the fallout, and I honestly wasn't ready to. But she was there already, sitting at the table, laughing with our mom like nothing had happened. When she saw me walk in, she didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled and said, "Oh my God, Sarah, you look rested. I guess having no wedding stress helps, huh?" It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it, light, airy, dismissive, with a flick of her perfectly manicured hand. Like my heartbreak was an inconvenience she'd already moved past. My mother scolded her gently, saying, "Laura, not now." But I was already spiraling. I held it together during dinner, but afterward, I pulled her aside into the hallway. "You lied to him, didn't you?" I whispered. My voice was shaking, but my eyes were locked on hers. "You sent him those messages." She blinked, then gave a half smile. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Sarah," she said sweetly, like she was speaking to a child. I think the stress is getting to you. Maybe you should talk to someone. My blood ran cold. I trusted you, I whispered. You were supposed to stand by me on my wedding day. She leaned in, just a little lowering her voice so our parents couldn't hear. Maybe Michael just saw something he didn't like. Maybe you weren't as perfect as you thought. And with that, she walked away. That night, I cried harder than I had the night Michael left, because this wasn't just a broken engagement. It was a fracture in the very foundation of who I was. My family, my identity, my sense of safety. It all felt compromised. Over the next few weeks, whispers started reaching me from mutual friends. Things Laura had accidentally mentioned in passing, things that made me look like I was unstable, manipulative, even dishonest. It was like she was rewriting my story behind my back, shaping a version of me that people would question, doubt, eventually avoid. And she did it so effortlessly under the guise of concern. Then came the gut punch. One morning, as I sat alone at my favorite coffee shop, trying to journal my way through the pain, I glanced at my phone and saw a new post on Instagram. It was Laura. She had posted a photo of herself at a wine tasting event with Michael. They weren't holding hands. There was no PDA, but the caption read, "Good company, good wine, no drama," and Michael had liked it. I stared at the screen for a full minute, trying to breathe. So it was true. She was seeing him now. Maybe not officially, maybe just as friends. But the intention was there. The betrayal was real. What kind of sister does that? What kind of man falls for it? I felt my throat tighten. My fingers went numb. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet, burning resolve. I couldn't make Laura tell the truth. I couldn't force Michael to see what was happening. But I could choose how I responded. I could let them break me. Or I could rise. The weeks that followed were surreal. Every time I tried to focus on something mundane, grading papers, buying groceries, even just walking the dog, some reminder would pop up and pull me back under. A familiar song on the radio. A comment from a coworker about how strong I was. A wedding photo I forgot to delete from my phone. Each one was a sharp jab to the ribs. But pain, I learned, has layers. There's the initial shock, raw and paralyzing. Then comes the dull ache that lingers, that makes you flinch at even the thought of joy. And finally, there's the numbness, where you go through the motions but feel like a hollow version of who you used to be. I was somewhere between ache and numb when the messages started. Anonymous texts, no names, no context. Just messages like, "He's not who you think he is." Ask her where she was last Thursday. Check his Venmo. At first I ignored them. Probably just someone trying to stir the pot. But after the fourth or fifth one, curiosity got the better of me. I checked Michael's Venmo. There it was, payments to Laura, small amounts, a few labeled as lunch or concert tics. One even said wine night. My stomach dropped. Why would he be paying her for those things if they were just friends? And more importantly, why were they even seeing each other that often? I reached out to a mutual friend, Angela. She was on the guest list for our wedding and had always been neutral ground. "Hey," I texted, trying to sound casual, weird question, "but have you seen Michael lately?" A few minutes later, she replied, "Yeah, actually. Saw him with Laura at that gallery downtown last weekend. Thought it was Odd. Odd. That word stuck with me. The more I asked around, the more pieces came together. Michael and Laura weren't just casually bumping into each other. They were actively spending time together. And while neither of them had gone public with it, it was clear to anyone paying attention. Meanwhile, Laura kept up her act. She'd comment on my mom's Facebook posts, send me the occasional checking-in text, and even dropped off cookies at my door one morning. The card read, "Thought you could use something sweet. Love you always, Laura." I threw the cookies away. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came one Sunday afternoon. I was at my parents' house helping Dad clean out the garage when he casually mentioned Michael might come by later. He said he wants to talk. I froze. Talk about what Dad shrugged. He didn't say. But he sounded, I don't know, like he was trying to make peace. That sentence haunted me all day. What peace? There was no peace to be made. Michael didn't show up that day, but 2 days later, he did. He knocked on my door around 7 p.m. I almost didn't open it, but a part of me, a small, fragile part, needed closure. He looked the same, but smaller somehow, like he hadn't been sleeping. "Hey," he said. "Hi." He held up a paper bag. "Brought your favorite. Tie from that place on Maple." I didn't move. He cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. The silence was thick. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A real one." I didn't say anything. I believed something that wasn't true. I let someone manipulate how I saw you, and I'm so sorry. His voice cracked on the last word. I stared at him. "You believed I cheated." I did, because of fake screenshots, from someone who had every reason to want us apart. He nodded, eyes downcast. "I see that now." I took a shaky breath. "Why is she even in your life still?" He hesitated. "It wasn't like that at first. I was hurt. She was there. She listened. She orchestrated the entire thing. I know." Silence. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't in months: regret. Real aching regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just needed to say it. Out loud." I swallowed. "And are you two together now?" He didn't answer right away, just exhaled. "We were, briefly, but it felt wrong. Because it was wrong." "I ended it," he said. "She didn't take it well." "Good," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He stood up. "I'll go. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." As he walked to the door, he paused. "You're not the person she made you out to be. You're better than both of us." I didn't respond. I couldn't. After he left, I cried, but it wasn't the same kind of tears. It wasn't heartbreak or betrayal. It was release. I realized something in that moment. I didn't want him back. I wanted peace. I wanted clarity. I wanted me again. And that meant rebuilding from the ashes. I threw myself into community work, volunteered at a shelter, started mentoring young girls at a local nonprofit. I even began writing again, something I hadn't done in years. And slowly, the pain dulled. The world didn't look so gray anymore. Then came the fundraiser. It was a charity gala for underprivileged schools, and I'd been asked to speak. I was terrified, but I said yes. I stood on stage, hands trembling, and told my story. Not the scandal, not the drama, just the journey from broken to better, from betrayal to rebirth. People applauded. Some cried. Afterward, a man approached me. Tall, kind eyes, a little awkward, in the best way. Your story, it moved me, he said. I'm Ethan. We talked for hours that night, and we kept talking. Over coffee, on walks through texts that made me smile again. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't perfect, but he was real and kind. And slowly, he helped me remember what it felt like to be seen, to be valued. One evening, a few months later, Ethan invited me to his sister's engagement party. I hesitated, nervous about being in a romantic setting again. But I went. And guess who else was there, Laura? Apparently she was friends with the groom's cousin or something. I didn't care. She saw me across the room and froze. I looked different, stronger, happier. She approached cautiously. Sarah. Hey. I smiled politely. Laura. You look, well, I am, a beat. I never meant to. I held up a hand, don't. She looked around, suddenly aware that people were watching. I could see it in her face, the realization that whatever power she once had over me was gone. Take care, Laura, I said, then turned back to Ethan, who slipped his arm around my waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was the moment I knew. I had won, not by stooping to her level, not by exposing her lies or seeking revenge, but by living, by loving myself enough to heal, by choosing joy over bitterness, by letting the truth speak louder than the noise. And Laura, she became a footnote in my story, a cautionary tale in a life that was finally beautifully mine again. Months had passed since that night at the engagement party where I last saw Laura. I'd closed the chapter, or at least I thought I had. But karma, she doesn't knock. She arrives when least expected. It started with a phone call from my mom. Honey, did you hear about Laura? My body tensed. No, why? She lost her job. Apparently there was something unethical. I'm not sure of the details. I stayed quiet. She was working as a communications manager for that nonprofit downtown, right? My mom continued. Well, turns out she exaggerated her credentials on her resume. Someone tipped them off. I bit my lip. And there's more, Mom said. She tried to accuse a coworker of stealing her ideas, but HR pulled the email threads and it all backfired. My heart didn't leap with joy. Not exactly. It was more like a deep, slow breath of justice. That organization she worked for, I'd volunteered with them before. They were the ones who helped me get back on my feet after the breakup. The irony wasn't lost on me. Still, I hadn't spoken a word against her. Laura had destroyed her own image with the same manipulative habits that tore apart my life. The truth had simply caught up. A few weeks later, I was invited to a panel at a women's leadership conference. The topic, Rebuilding After Betrayal. Fitting right. After my talk, I was chatting with attendees when a woman approached me. She looked vaguely familiar, sharp features, confident posture. I'm Dana, she said. I used to work with Laura. I just wanted to say, thank you for your story. It filled in a lot of blanks. I raised an eyebrow. I always had a strange feeling about her. Dana continued. She lied so effortlessly, tried to sabotage another girl on our team who got promoted before her. She leaned in, lowering her voice. You didn't out her. You didn't need to. But you helped more than you know. I thanked her and walked away, heart pounding. It hit me. Then, I never had to do anything. I just had to live authentically. The world had done the rest, but the real twist came later. Ethan and I had grown closer than I'd expected. One evening, he invited me to a charity dinner his company was sponsoring. A high-end affair filled with executives, donors, and some local influencers. We were seated at a table near the stage, just finishing dessert, when one of the hosts introduced the night's surprise keynote speaker. And now, to share a personal journey of resilience and image management in the modern world. Please welcome Laura Blake. My fork froze midair. Ethan looked at me. "Isn't that your—" "Yeah," I muttered. Eyes locked on the woman walking onto the stage. She looked composed, elegant, polished in a carefully curated way. Laura began her speech, spinning a tale about overcoming workplace betrayal and rebuilding after being unfairly accused. The audience listened politely, but something felt off. I watched her hands tremble slightly when she took a sip of water. Midway through her speech, she paused longer than necessary. Her voice wavered, and then something unexpected happened. A man in the back of the room stood up and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Didn't you get fired for lying on your resume?" Gasps rippled through the room. Laura froze. Color drained from her face. The host rushed up to the mic. "Sir, please." But the damage was done. People whispered, some pulled out their phones. Laura tried to recover, stumbling through the next lines of her speech, but her charm had cracked. She wrapped up quickly, exiting the stage in a blur of forced smiles and shaking hands. Back at our table, Ethan leaned in. "That was public karma," I finished for him. We didn't stay long after that. As we walked out, I spotted Laura in the hallway, talking to someone, probably trying to explain the incident. She saw me. Our eyes met. She looked tired, deflated, alone, and I felt something unexpected: compassion. Not forgiveness, not trust, just the quiet understanding that life had already delivered her punishment. Anything else would be overkill. Weeks passed, and her name stopped coming up. Her online presence faded. Someone told me she moved to a different state, started over. I didn't need to follow. I had no curiosity left. One afternoon, as I walked with Ethan through the farmer's market, we passed a booth with hand-painted signs that read, "Live loudly, love honestly, let the truth speak." It stopped me in my tracks. Ethan noticed. "You okay?" I smiled. "More than okay." That night, he held me close and whispered, "I don't know what she did to you, but I know you deserve everything good in this world." I looked at him, at this life I'd built from ruin, and I knew the truth. Revenge doesn't always come through action. Sometimes the deepest revenge is healing in plain sight. It's funny how the heart learns to heal in silence. For the longest time, I thought closure would come with an apology. From Laura, from Michael, maybe even from the universe itself. But instead, closure came quietly through peace, through rebuilding, through love that didn't need to be loud to be real. Ethan and I eventually bought a small house outside the city. Nothing extravagant, but filled with light music and Sunday mornings on the porch with coffee and laughter. One evening, I was unpacking an old box from my classroom memories, from my teaching years, when I came across a photo of me and Laura. We were just kids, smiling with ice cream on our faces. For a brief moment, I mourned. Not for the sister she became, but for the one I thought I had. And then I let it go. Because the truth is, not everyone is meant to stay in your story. Some are just there to test the strength of your voice, and mine, it's never been stronger. Months later, I ran into Michael at a bookstore. He looked older, heavier, not just physically, but in spirit. He smiled softly, almost apologetically. "I heard you're doing well," he said. "I am," I replied warmly. And I meant it. We exchanged a few words, nothing deep, nothing unresolved. He wished me happiness. I wished him peace. Then we parted ways. As I walked out, Ethan was waiting in the car, waving at me like a goofball. And in that simple moment, sunlight filtering through the windshield, his silly grin, my heartbeat steady, I knew. The best revenge was never pain. It was joy. Honest, quiet joy. The kind they can't steal. The kind they never expected me to find. But I did. And I kept it. Forever.